Hello and welcome to the big picture. In a truly historic event, the economic sanctions imposed by the United States, European Union and the United Nations on Iran related to its nuclear program was lifted on Saturday following a declaration by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA report clearing Iran noted that Iran had shipped 98% of its nuclear fuel to Russia, dismantled more than 12,000 centrifuges so that they could not enrich uranium, and poured cement into the core of a reactor designed to produce plutonium. All this led to US President Barack Obama declaring that Iran will not get its hand on a nuclear bomb. The lifting of the sanctions, meanwhile, will free Iran from the oil and financial sanctions and released roughly $100 billion of its assets. However, the US has imposed fresh sanctions on 11 Iranian companies and individuals over a recent ballistic missile test. Iran, now free of the major sanctions, is expected to play a major role internationally in trade and business, apart from a strategic role. We will discuss today what the lifting of the sanctions entails and how it will impact India in particular and the world in general. To discuss this, I have with me Salman Haider, former Foreign Secretary, Dr. G. Balachandran, Consulting Fellow at the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis, Professor A.K. Pasha of the Center for West Asian Studies at the JNU, Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Union Ministry of Industries and Commerce, and on the phone line from Washington, D.C. is Chidananda Rajghatta, Foreign Editor and US Correspondent of the Times of India. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Haider, is this truly a historic deal?
I would regard it as historic. I think it is the correct word that you used. It changes the situation. It opens up many fresh possibilities, and that burden of ostracism, of being isolated, that has been imposed on Iran will no longer apply, and to play, as you said yourself, play its full part in international affairs.
When you say that it will open up possibilities, are you talking from the Iranian point of view, or is it a global thing which you're talking?
I would firstly look at the regional angle, which is of major interest to us, but globally it certainly opens up the scene for Iran. And we expect them to play, they can be expected to play a much bigger part in regional and global affairs than has been possible for them for the last couple of decades.
Okay. Dr. Balachandran, whatever compliance of Iran in the last couple of years that we have discussed on this program in the past also, what has been happening ever since the US, Russia and all got together, and now from the compliance of Iran to all the conditions which had been laid down, is it now clear to everybody that what Iran has now is a peaceful nuclear program?
Oh, certainly yes. I mean, today Iran's nuclear program is under far, far greater and closer scrutiny than IAEA is doing for any other country.
No other country has that kind of
That sort of a limitation. In fact, IAEA, Iran has, temporarily for next 8 years, given up a lot of the rights which other NPT signatories have. They've given up voluntarily doing certain things which they could have done. As Mr. Haider said, it's all for the simple reason. Iran's potential is far greater than what they have achieved till today. This frees them from these problems that they have been having, and provided nothing untoward happens in the next couple of years, I have no doubt that Iran is capable of achieving far more, both in the regional arena and in the international arena, given its population, its financial resources, its human resources, and above all, the competence of Iranians in all these areas.
Right, but sir, one of the things which was being said, that Iran has always defended itself, saying that it was always its nuclear program was always peaceful. But now, when we see that the kind of compliance it has been forced to do, is there any doubt that it was heading towards some kind of it was not so peaceful as it claimed?
No, it is a close call. In the sense, so far, except one or two things which they should have done, which they didn't do. That is, although technically they were right in not doing that, that is the new enrichment plant, which they did not inform IAEA before, although they were not required to do that. So far, they have not, there is no indication that other than the nuclear material which was declared, that they have in secret any other nuclear place. Unfortunately, what happened during the previous couple of years, the former president made a whole lot of very wild statements that we have got plans for a number of enrichment plants, we will do this, we will do that. And that, I think, sort of disturbed people. But so far, there was no indication, although some other actions were on the borderline, that they were actually would have been in possession of a nuclear weapon within any short period. But the question was, given their ability, capability, financial resources, people were very worried if they did decide to do that, they could go towards it very quickly. That was only the fear.
But now
there is no question.
Now there is no question. As President Barack Obama has declared,
No.
they will never have a nuclear weapon.
Let's put it this way, never is a too strong
Never is.
word. For the next 8 years, it will be very difficult, extremely difficult for Iran to take any action that it will lead towards acquiring of a nuclear explosive.
Why
jet.
8 years?
Because they are prohibited from enriching anything for 8 years.
8 years. Okay.
After 8 years, they can enrich if
So
they
for
want.
8 years, it's a safe statement to make.
8 years is a very safe statement.
Okay, Professor Pasha. So what kind of repercussions do you see in the regional dynamics following this lifting of the sanctions?
One of the important points which emerged from President Obama's statement last night was that although he said we will take care of the security concerns of Israel and the GCC states, but he also made it clear that Iran and the United States are beginning to have a new relationship.
Right.
And he hinted at other major problems like Syria, Yemen, the Islamic State, Iraq, and the continuing turmoil in Lebanon and Bahrain. And the first indication came through the prisoner swap that the American and the Iranian prisoners, which was not part of the deal,
Right.
they have exchanged.
It was a separate deal.
Yes. And the second one was Obama was particularly thankful to the Iranian government and Hassan Rouhani particularly that the financial assets case which Iran had lodged in international tribunals, that has been withdrawn.
Yes.
And that would have involved billions and billions of dollars of extra payment, although the Iranians would get with their interest the money. So that is also out of the nuclear deal which flows. And the third one is already on Syria. Iran is an important member of the Geneva Peace Group, so which was resisted by the Americans and the EU for long. But now Iran is a major player there. And hopefully in Bahrain, in Iraq, in Yemen and other hotspots, the Americans would need Iranian cooperation to stabilize and reassure the monarchies, particularly the GCC monarchies, that the deal is not all that bad. And last point is the Israelis also have reduced their rhetoric against Iran, which is an understanding that the point to which they went was counterproductive and that they must look towards the United States for the rapprochement which has emerged between the two countries, and they must take advantage of this thing. But the overall picture which one gets is despite decades of regime change agenda by the United States, they are now talking about mutually beneficial cooperation relation. So now America recognizes that the mullah regime is on equal par with the United States, is legitimate.
Okay.
And that is, I think, a big gain for the Iranians.
That's a big gain. All right. And Chidananda,
Yes,
how do you view it sitting there? You know, and two things. One, what Professor Pasha was talking about Israel and how Israel is looking at this. And also, of course, the domestic compulsions, the domestic kind of reactions to this.
Well, first of all, Girish, this rapprochement is part of a grand American reset inspired by President Obama. it's not just Iran. You also have to consider what he did on the Cuba front.
Right.
This is a president who is going to leave quite a remarkable legacy in many areas, including foreign policy. And, the two major achievements are the way he has reset U.S. ties with Cuba and Iran, both countries which have been demonized for a long time in the U.S. political discourse. I think he has significant support for it within the country. There is a whole generation of Americans, and indeed all across the world, people who don't understand why this took so long. A lot of people forget that Iran was actually a U.S. ally for a number of years before the revolution in 1979. In fact, even fewer people know that Iran and Israel were allies. Iran and Israel actually co-manufactured weapons. So, this is something which is a throwback to another era. One of the things, significant things that has driven this, my sense is realization in the United States of the kind of toxicity that Saudi Arabia and its, practice of radical politics brought to the whole region. And the Saudis also did not have their own cause. When what also helped the United States in the meantime is the change in the whole energy paradigm with, new discoveries of energy resources and new technologies that the Americans mastered and the loss of salience of oil. So all this has helped President Obama reset ties with Iran. I think it was long overdue. And there are whole generations of Iranians also who, to whom the revolution is a distant memory. One of the things that, a lot of people don't realize, I think one of your co-panelists mentioned is, Iran is a great country. It's a legacy of a great civilization.
Absolutely.
It has made great advances. It has always been very advanced in science and technology. Very few people know that throughout all these troubles, throughout all these years, Iran has been sending a number of students and academics to the US, even through sanctions.
Right.
More Iranian students study in the United States than, say, Pakistani students.
Right.
And they have a very rich legacy in science, technology, arts, culture. They're inheritors of a great civilization. And I think, President Obama has done a remarkable job in
So is this
and the Iranians have also helped coming forward.
Chidananda. So is this the general feeling? Is this the general feeling in the United States that this was something which had to be done, and whatever criticisms which we are hearing from the Republicans and certain sections which are closer to the Israeli lobby, are these something which will be ridden over after a while?
Absolutely. Well, there is a hardline constancy, obviously. There is what is called the Jewish lobby. I put that in quotes. There are, pro-Israel, pro-hardline Israel elements who will always oppose this. But by and large, I think the sentiment is, you have to understand, this is a new country in the sense of, there's a young generation which simply does not share the views of whatever happened 40 years ago. It's not relevant anymore. This is, 2016. There are young Americans who will be only too happy to eat Iranian pistachios and caviar. There are young Iranians who want iPads and, American cookies.
Okay.
So there is something that happened in the 1970s or, 80s, not really relevant now. And I think President Obama has sensed that moment, not just with Iran, but also with Cuba.
Right. Okay. Okay, Chidu, I'll come back to you. It is one of the commentators writing today. I was reading. He was saying that Iranians are one of the most pro-American people in the Middle East. Actually, so Mr. Dua, what are these sanctions which have actually been lifted? How is it going to affect the trade and commerce with India and globally?
Let me start by saying that historic as this event might have been, the one which lifting of the sanctions day before, these were a limited lifting of sanctions. The sanctions applied by the United States, EU and the United Nations with respect to nuclear weaponization
Right.
of Iran. Sanctions have been in position in Iran since 1979,
Right.
when the American embassy was taken, some hostages were taken at the American embassy. Thereafter, in 1996, foreign investment, particularly the American investment, it started with America, subsequently extended to the US. Investment in the oil and gas industry in Iran was also put under sanctions. We have seen a series of sanctions since then. We still have sanctions remaining with respect to what was imposed for ballistic Iran acquiring capabilities for a ballistic missile, sanctions pertaining to human rights violations, as well as sanctions about terrorism. What has been lifted are significantly two sanctions. One is that individuals and firms are now free to trade with oil and gas of Iran. But while they can do this, the American system, banking system still cannot be used.
Right.
That restriction remains. Also, Americans cannot.
But
trade.
rest of the world can
Those
deal
are
with
the
it.
sanctions. See, the sanctions. If you if you didn't use the American banking system earlier, even then the rest of the world was free.
And why was it that India had to deal with them in rupee terms and not in dollar
Yeah,
terms?
absolutely. Because the Americans took upon themselves, in a number of cases over the years, saying if you dealt with dollars or transaction went in dollars, the clearing house for dollars was the United States, irrespective of where the transaction occurred. That is how all kinds of penalties were imposed upon English banks, European banks, huge amounts, because the transactions used to be in dollars. Second, sanctions continue upon traders in the United States, except for 3 or 4 agricultural items which have been mentioned. That's things like caviar, pistachio, saffron. Then they've also talked about carpets and aircrafts and components thereof. For the rest of the things, the sanctions are still in position. The European Union instead has lifted all the sanctions which it had imposed.
Right.
And India, now talking about the impact of it, there is going to be globally, certainly the United States, Iran would be able to play a much greater role than it could in the last 35 years since the sanctions were imposed. But it's still not the full role. We hope that this is a beginning towards that. The other sanctions also in course of time will get reviewed. Coming to the impact on India, I see 3 or 4 things happening immediately, apart from the fact that we'll now be in a position to clear the $6.5 million, which our $6.5 billion, which our state-owned oil and gas companies owe to Iran. We have been hitherto paying only the rupee component,
Right.
but not the dollar. Second, we would be able to get Iranian oil, which we could get earlier in limited quantities and which was a dispensation given in our favor. For us, that's a very important aspect, because our refineries, which had been set up in the 60s and 70s, were all based on the sweet crude which comes from Iran.
Okay.
The complexity, as you would probably have heard this word, complexity of the refineries to deal with that kind of crude was very high. They have, of course, less byproducts, what in this industry is called distillates, but we were not able to use our refineries to the full capacity because we did not have this sweet crude, or we had to get it from other countries which were at a much longer distance. Logistics pricing was an issue. The impact of, however, this is going to be somewhat muted for the fact that today there's a buyer's market in the oil and
Right.
gas industry, no longer the suppliers. But for us, the immediate benefit is we will be able to incur lower cost on logistics, and probably the Iranians, who have now said in a few weeks' time they'll be able to reach a figure of 500,000 barrels a day, they will have to offer higher discounts than the OPEC countries were doing. the rest of them doing in order to be able to market that. That's a clear benefit.
Okay.
Second, I would just say our trade with Iran and Central Asia is likely to grow because Chabar port
Right.
is going to be a critical for both these events. And I think our investments into Iran will grow, and Iran is going to be seeking foreign investments if the President Hassan Rouhani's statement is to be taken seriously. Third, the pipeline, Iran, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, which has been pending for a long time, that may start making progress. And finally, I think our construction companies who were hitherto not sure whether they'll get paid if they took up works in the Chabar port, etc., they would start benefiting from it as soon as these sanctions, as soon as the environment changes a little bit more. That means the banks are sufficiently convinced that the money would be easily repatriated, etc., which might take a few weeks' time.
Okay. Mr. Haider, how long do you think the impact of this lifting of the sanctions will happen? Second thing is, how do you expect India's and Iran's relationships to improve?
Well, I don't know how long it will take. I expect that the lawyers, international lawyers and diplomats and civil servants of all stripe will have a field day now. Because as we have just been told, the sanctions are lifted, but yet some remain.
Yes.
Now, what the implications are of this partial lifting, the main thing has been done. I think that the historic effort has actually been successfully concluded. But the finer points have to be teased out, and I think this is going to be something that will have a lot of people deeply engaged to see what the implications are and how matters can, in fact, be improved according to their respective points of view. So far as India is concerned, I think that what Mr. Dua said is highly relevant. To my mind, I would add only one more thing to that, to the various possibilities that have been now opened up, which is that there's a strategic element to this. We should not think that the sanctions are only a matter of money. Money, of course, is how it's expressed, but the constraints that were imposed by the sanctions, especially by the US monitoring of what was going on, meant that many important projects of great interest to us had to be aborted.
Right.
The IPI, the
gas pipeline,
which Iran actually has been promoting for many years, and because it sees a natural, what should we say, bonding between itself and India. They produce natural gas, we consume it, we need it. Right. So that link is a very obvious one, and one that Iran has very actively been promoting. They also see it as a building block of a better and more peaceful South Asia. And therefore, one of the elements that Iran has been referring to in the IPI is that it's a building block for peace. And I think that these are concepts which will, again, the access to Central Asia through one of our great needs through Chabahar, through Iran, that these are possibilities which have a strategic fallout so far as we are concerned.
Okay. Professor Balachandran, why is it that that US has taken certain steps, but it's still not fully opened it up? What are the constraints it has? And these missile tests which Iran conducted recently, because of which fresh sanctions have been imposed. How does it? Why is it happening?
Oh, there are two or three things. Now, missiles, they always have been very worried about missile development anywhere in the world. Okay?
No, these missile tests, when we are saying that they don't have a nuclear bomb, how much do these missile tests matter?
The trouble is, internationally now you got the question of weapons of mass destruction. You include both nuclear weapons and missiles. Okay. But look, let me put it this way. What has happened is good. but there's a hell of a lot of things to happen which can derail it. Like I was telling Mr. Haider, one of the major things is this. They have not removed all the entities in Iran from the sanctions.
Right.
One of the major elements of Iran, the bigger players, one of the biggest players in Iranian domestic politics and military and strategy is the IRGC.
Right.
IRGC is still on the sanctions list.
Absolutely.
Anybody dealing with IRGC will be sanctioned.
Right.
Now, question comes around. India, so far, none of the US sanctions. For instance, the Iranian...
IRGC is the
Iranian
Revolutionary Guards.
Okay. Now, Iranian gas industry was never under sanctions. It was our own self-imposed limitation that we didn't do in Chabahar. I did a study on Chabahar. There was no element of US sanctions that would have applied on India if we had invested in Chabahar, except for one thing. Any development of Chabahar will require India to involve a lot of Iranian companies. If any one of those companies
Was.
in any manner involved with IRGC, India would have been sanctioned.
Right.
If we,
And
now,
that threat remains even today.
even today.
Right.
But as far as the gas pipeline goes, there was no sanctions on any gas industry in Iran at all. Provided
Again, it was self-imposed, you say.
it was. Now, if in the process we had to transfer some money to seize Iranian government or Iranian central bank, that would have been sanctioned.
Right.
So, right now I see there's nothing, India, whatever it could have done before, which it didn't do, it can do with confidence. They could have done it earlier, but they were very nervous.
Now that worry is over.
But
Still,
the problem, the entity, the SDN list on Iran is very large. We have to be extremely careful that nothing involved on that one.
okay.
Two, anything that involves any American licensed item, technology or component in any product cannot be exported to Iran without US permission.
Okay.
So we have got a long way to navigate,
still-
but no problem.
Okay, Professor Pasha, very quickly, you think that, with Israel showing its displeasure at this point of time, and we discussed about the Saudi Arabia problem last week. Now, how is this going to affect the regional problems there?
Well, as I said, it gives a positive approach, not only to the Syrian crisis immediately,
Exactly.
where peace talks are imminent next week or so. Iranian cooperation is crucial there. And despite Saudi objections and so on and so forth, the Americans and the Russians are going ahead of involvement of all of these important players, including Iran. Number two, the Israelis are now becoming pragmatic people. They have realized that they went so far.
And now you said that, but we don't know how pragmatic. We'll have to wait and watch.
Because for the Israelis, Iran is important, and if the Americans can work for rapprochement, I don't think the Israelis will be very much behind.
What kind of
in
rapprochement?
that,
But what kind of rapprochement will between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the context of what's happening there? We'll wait and watch. But anyway, this has been a very major development, as all my panelists agree, has been a historic development. We'll wait and watch how it will all pan out in the coming weeks and months. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, the big picture, same time tomorrow.